Hello, my name is Dr. Tickman. I'm an internist based in Las Vegas. My first question is for Erynn. I recently read a book by Dr. Gundry, The Plant Paradox. He mentioned about lectins in foods, mostly in beans, nightshades. What can you say about it? Do you have any comments on that?
Can you repeat the question too, just for good measure?
Yeah, so from what can you hear me? What I understand is that you're asking about, in the recent book, The Plant Paradox, which is Dr. Gundry's book, he does talk a lot about in plants there are anti-nutrients, phytates, lectins, and what my thoughts were on that, I suppose. Is that right? Okay. So that's a book that's on my list, and definitely looking forward to reading that. Yeah, I think a lot of us are sensitive to those types of anti-nutrients. Because like I had mentioned, they can be very irritating to the gut. So, anyone with predisposition toward gut issues may have some sensitivity. Also autoimmune issues, which of course there's a huge link between gut and autoimmunity, might be more sensitive to these anti-nutrients. But, I see people without gut or autoimmune diseases that have sensitivities as well. I don't know how many patients in our clinic that have osteoarthritis, which we think of as a degenerative normal aging process, that when they remove nightshades specifically, then a lot of their symptoms will resolve. And so I think that's kind of individual, and that some of the processes I talked about, like the sprouting, can lessen the sensitivity to those issues. But that's something that each person has to try out for themselves.
He's also mentioning pressure cooking the beans to destroy the lectins.
Okay.
I cannot comment on that. I'll have to read.
Okay, thank you. Yes. First.
Is it on? Can you hear it?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. My name is Walter, and I just want to say thank you guys for speaking. I've got a bit of a personal question, but relatable to everyone. So we talked about calcification, and getting a score over 1,000 or something like that is pretty bad. And my father has that, while my mother has a score of 0 in the same household. It's kind of crazy. And I want to know if there's a way to reverse that. We talked about just getting a test done in 2 years, but specifically a way to, reverse that, not prevent it, but to actually reverse it.
Okay, yeah, that's a common question actually. Thank you. So reversing calcification, unfortunately, the literature is very sparse on such. So in terms of published science, there's not much. To give an example, there's one published paper, a very large one, where their conclusion is that calcification is inevitable, the progression. And they show a ton of data from many people, and they all progress and they accept it's inevitable. Now, they're not aware, of course, of many root causes and factors that could help progress. The only published study I know of is William Davis, wheat belly, and he has published his protocol, and with a large number of patients, he's got, I think, around 50% regressed or more. Some stayed level, which is unusual, and some did progress, but at a low rate. He used not just vitamin D and low carb and all the other things you'd be familiar of, he also used statins. But statins tend to increase the calcification through increasing density, so you can basically conclude that he did regress with non-meds with his protocol. There is another published paper that shows impressive regression using a whole dizzying array of micronutrients, and I have the paper, I can send it later. But that's about it in published science. Anecdotally, there are quite a few people turning up now who are getting regressions by applying keto and low carb and the other things we talked about, but it's not published. I might add in, I don't want to go on too long, but if you progress gently after going low carb and applying all the fixes, that may be fine, because there are papers that show it's the progression that's the major risk. So if you have a high score, but you even stabilize or only increase 5-10% per year, you may have a degree of safety similar to a person with a low score. So everyone wants to regress, but to be quite honest, if you arrest the progression, you may achieve nearly as much safety. And there's some very good papers on that. The last thing I'd say on calcification, I didn't want to get into in my talk, you have density score in calcification and volume, and the rolled up score is a conglomerate of the two in an algorithm. But if you increase your score primarily from the density vector and less the volume, you may have very stable atherosclerosis. So you may increase gently, but if it's density dominated, it may be actually a very, very positive sign. Whereas if you increase your calcification and it's volume dominated, it indicates more soft plaque and more exposure to events. So I guess that's a long answer, but that's trying to put a lot of stuff into a short period.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Wood. I'm a retired wellness consultant to large corporations. And my question is, Ivor, to follow up on that, it happens to be it's on the same topic but a little bit different spin. And that is the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force doesn't recommend calcium screening as they do blood pressure screening, cholesterol screening, et cetera. And they say that it has weak evidence, and I'm sure they also say it's not cost effective and too many false positives, et cetera. Is there any move to try to cite the better evidence for the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force to reconsider this, but since you're saying it's one of the biggest, best predictors, even better than blood pressure or cholesterol, obviously. So if you could comment on why you think they're not buying it and why they should.
Okay, yeah, great. We saw that one come out, myself and Jeff, and it was quite amusing. So they were quite selective in their studies, in my opinion. Also, we have a 30-year history since the invention of the scan where there's been massive resistance to it for many, many reasons. Now, we don't want to get into conspiracy, but one reason the calcification scan was very unpopular within the cardiology community was it went direct to the consumer, and they were outraged by that 20 years ago. Another reason is a team in the Mayo Clinic did a study, and they discovered that we could lower by 50% the number of people going into the cath lab if they just did a quick CAC scan, because the zeros, of which 50% were, there was no point going in for invasive cath. But a lot of the revenue for the Mayo Clinic came from the cath lab, so the project was shut down. So there's a revenue problem with calcification. Also for medications, there are countless people who a calcification scan would immediately say they should not be on medications. That's another problem in the business. I could go on. I will actually say another 20 calcification studies, and it is the ultimate test for atherosclerosis, showed no linkages to LDL or cholesterol. That's a big problem too, as you can imagine. So there's a huge force out there against calcification for decades. We're trying to get around that now. The Widowmaker movie, which you can get on Vimeo, or we can send a link afterwards, explains a lot of what I said. The reality is the data is the data. I have an interview, if people want to Google Budoff, B-U-D-O-F-F, Ivor in YouTube, you'll get the interview we did with the world's expert in coronary scanning and in cardiology, Professor Matt Budoff. And that will go through a lot of the core for people. And also I can send links later to the endless compelling data. One last thing I'll say though, there is an argument against calcification that sure it's way better than all the risk factors put together, and sure it will identify the people truly at risk, but the other alternative is we just medicate everyone, because the medications are cheap enough now that why bother paying for scanning when we can just block medicate? And that is published in papers. That's not me saying that. It is published. Just medicate everyone. So there's so many reasons why that paper went the way it did, and I think that's the battle that we're engaged in now, is to get proper science applied into those communities.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Palmer, primary care doctor out of California, and I have sort of kind of two questions. One is sort of a follow-up with the coronary artery calcification test. I always think about the radiation exposure, especially if I'm doing it, every 2 years in somebody who's higher risk, and that concerns me. And then sort of corollary, in terms of risks of the homogenization and pasteurization of dairy products. I mean, I know that initially was done because people were, getting bacterial illnesses that proved to be fatal. And so just weighing the pros and the cons of doing these tests or adopting these lifestyle changes versus the sort of historical risk or known risks, because not everybody talked about the risks. Thanks.
More calcification. Yeah, that's another classic argument, the radiation. So I've researched that one. You can get it as low as 1 millisievert or up to 2 millisieverts, and a mammogram is around 0.5 millisieverts. So it's comparable to a mammogram. Now, last I checked, no one's really been stopping mammograms. And RCTs on mammograms with, I think, up to 50,000 people performed in Canada over 20 years showed that the use of mammograms for screening is actually very ineffective. But again, no one really talks about the radiation, and CAC is comparable. It's around, not much different than a year of background radiation, and most people will only need one scan of what I would say is a trivial amount of radiation. If you're high risk, you've obviously got a major vested interest in taking a little bit more RADs, you know, a couple of years later. I'd say the cost benefit of knowing whether your progression has been brought under control for the biggest killer in the world obliterates the radiation question, in my mind, as the technical person. But yeah, I don't know, you could talk about it all day. I just don't think it has much merit.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, great presentations this morning. My name is Martha McKittrick, and I'm a registered dietitian from New York City. And Erynn, this question is for you. Your presentation was great. So my question is, I've been a low-carb proponent for many years, and I'm just kind of getting into keto. My concern is on the gut microbiome. We're obviously keeping the carbs to a minimum, and we're encouraging as many vegetables as you can, you know, to get a variety and natural foods. But what I find is a lot of my patients don't have enough prebiotics or probiotics in their diet. You know, I'm encouraging garlic, onions, all that kind of stuff. But do you ever recommend any like prebiotic supplements?
Sometimes. I think you can get a perfectly adequate amount of prebiotics within low carb. I mean, like you mentioned, garlic, onions, green leafy things, broccoli, cauliflower, all of these will feed flora in different ways, different types of fiber within each. And so there are plenty of low carb vegetables that will feed your flora. And I think, you know, even if you're on a 20 grams of carbs or less, you're still getting in some leafy things every day. So if I have patients that are working on rebuilding the gut or working on some sort of gut imbalance, then yes, sometimes that will supplement as well. But oftentimes it's not needed if you already have a healthy gut.
Okay, so if you find that somebody, just because of their lifestyle, maybe can't get in enough vegetables, you wouldn't just kind of go ahead and say, try prebiotin or something, some kind of a commercial prebiotic, like a teaspoon a day or whatever?
Not really. I ask about how the gut is feeling. Are they pooping on a regular basis? Does their gut feel bloated? Is it uncomfortable? If not, you know, if it ain't broke, then everything seems to be fine. So not necessarily. But I do have a lot of patients that come specifically to talk about gut issues, and that's a whole nother story.
And speaking of pooping, I've been having this conversation with people last night, actually, and people were saying it's kind of like a hush-hush topic. People don't talk about it that much. Is there anything else that you do with people who suffer from constipation? And I realize as they become fat adapted, it might not be as much of an issue, but in my patients, I hear that it is. Any tricks that you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of 50-50. When half the population goes low carb, their stools get better, and half they seem to be constipated. So it really just depends on the person. But sometimes I'll do like a blend of, you know, chia seeds and flaxseed, something like that, to kind of help if they're trying to stick with food. Sometimes it's just a good probiotic that's necessary. So I have a few favorites that I like, and I can talk to you about it later. Sometimes it is increasing the vegetable content a little bit, and that helps too. So it really is individual, but yeah, a lot of the time low carb can fix stool infrequency, and so it really just depends.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Tony Martinez. I look forward to speaking with you all on Sunday at our town hall as the president of the Public Health Collaboration USA, PHC USA, of which Ivor and Jeff are founding directors. And I wanted to address the comment to the gentleman who talked about the CAC and the problem with preventive the Preventive Medicine Institute and recommendations. We're going to be challenging those things. We are going to be challenging the whole context of healthcare in this area about metabolic health. And we'll talk about that on Sunday. I just want to say from personal experience, I wish I had had a calcium arterial scan, because 4 years ago this month, I had a heart attack. And I had a calcium arterial scan score December, and it was 146. And I thought that was, well, that's above 100, but that's not bad considering where I was probably long ago. But had I had that information, I could have made better decisions prior to that. And so I think, and I want to encourage the audience to get involved, we're going to be challenging this. And it's simply by presenting information and data, because our experiences speak for themselves. As a person here, in remission from type 2 diabetes now 4 years, back at my weight and clothing size from college, a triglyceride HDL score of 1.46 at last measurement. I love the work of Dave Feldman, who, you know, I'm praying, I'm hoping that some MacArthur Foundation fellows are watching, because this kind of work needs to be supported. And by the way, just so you know, I think isn't Dave remnant cholesterol VLDL? Isn't it that's the number?
Yeah, it's actually VLDL and IDL, and I didn't have the slide for it, but technically also remnant cholesterol.
Yes, because I remember when I looked at mine, and I did a cholesterol reading. Mine was like at 230 when I started a zero carb. And I remember looking at the VLDL was at like 15, and I remember you telling me, "Oh, well, you have a very good. You're okay. You're probably at hyper responding or close to that." So this is really fascinating, cutting edge stuff. But we're going to change the context of health and move it away from this flawed cholesterol fat hypothesis, which we know doesn't work, and move it to what the problem is, which is inflammation and insulin. And we welcome looking at all the different dietary plans that get people to healthy insulin and low inflammation. So I won't take any more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good story, Antonio. Thank you. That's good. Another question.
Hello. My name is Tom Everts. I'm a PA in a community health center. My question will be for Erynn. So community health center usually is lower socioeconomic status, right, of patients. So a lot of struggle with the cost, not only low carb, but also the quality of low carb. Are there any strategies that you implement to really focus not only on low carb, but the quality of this?
Sure, yeah. I mean, definitely if cost is an issue, just being low carb is the primary starting point. And sometimes that's as far as we get, and that's okay. You know, that's going to provide a world of benefits. But if there is some wiggle room, then organ meats, dirt cheap a lot of the time, and incredibly beneficial. I would say try to shop locally. You know, I noticed that, at least in Colorado, we have great farmers markets, and in the summer, some of the veggies are cheap. So that can be helpful. Fasting, I think I said this last year, fasting is cheap, and that goes right along with low-carb diets. So that is incorporated. I mean, I know so many people here that eat 1 or 2 meals a day. So if you're only doing that, you have, hopefully, more room to spend on food quality when you are eating. So yeah, there are a lot of kind of tips and tricks there. And then, of course, you'll want to remind patients you pay now or you pay later in one way or another. And so this is going to be less expensive to take care of yourself now than the hospital bills that come down the road. But yeah, I mean, we do what we can, and sometimes low carb is enough.
Yeah. And those SNAPs programs, don't you get double your money at farmers markets?
There are, yeah. I've heard of this, that sometimes even food stamps are accepted at certain farmers markets. So there are programs to look into, definitely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dave. This question is for Erynn. Somebody actually already asked it, but you didn't get a chance to answer it. So a lot of patients are afraid of the raw foods. And can you address the risks and benefits? And what do you tell your patients?
Yeah, I'm ready for you. I have data. Okay. So Let's see. During the 2000 to 2007 period, there were 12 hospitalizations of illnesses associated with raw milk. That's an average of 1.5 in a year. With approximately 9.4 million people drinking raw milk, that means you have to have about a 1 in 6 million chance of being hospitalized from drinking raw milk. There's also been one death from raw milk since the 1980s. Whereas there's been a lot more from produce and from raw fish, and we all love our sushi. So the risk of raw dairy is incredibly low as far as foodborne illness. And then I think this was kind of asked earlier, that pasteurization and homogenization, they change how we absorb vitamins and minerals, and they make the absorption less. And the fat in the dairy is needed to kind of activate the vitamins and minerals also. There's an interplay between the fats and the vitamins. And so when we're changing this, it can really cause some problems in how we absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, and there can be an imbalance that develops. So we need a balance between our A, D, E, K2 to help prevent issues like cardiovascular disease, if that helps.
Thank you. Eric.
Eric Westman, Durham, North Carolina. Dr. Crofts, great talk. All of you, great talks. Thinking about insulin and the glucose tolerance tests, just to remind myself, those were pretty much all done in carb eaters. Is that right?
It's not known.
Not known?
It's not known.
But they were collected at what years?
They were collected between early 1970s to the mid-1990s.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S., in and around Chicago. What we do know is that people who had with normal glucose tolerance but a Kraft pattern 5, Dr. Croft told them to go away, or if they had a low glucose response but a Kraft pattern 5, Dr. Croft told them to go away and have 2 weeks of a high carbohydrate diet, which was defined as at least 150 grams of carbohydrate a day, and then to come back and have the test again. So we don't know what foods these people were eating prior to the test.
Well, but my hunch, just my hunch, 1970s, 80s, when did the pyramid thing, don't even remember that.
Yes.
Was it a circle, a sphere?
My hunch is also that a lot of these people would be relatively low carb by today's standards.
So the reason that's important is always important to keep in mind under the context that the study was done, what they were eating, even though we didn't know, we might have a good hunch. So I'm seeing people who come to me keto or low carb for a long time. Someone decides to do a glucose tolerance test on them, and they don't look so good. The blood sugar goes up, the insulin has kind of a sluggish or lazy response. It doesn't mean that something's bad, does it?
No, it doesn't. What I tell people is if you've got known impaired glucose tolerance or known type 2 diabetes, there is no point in having your insulin tested done because my research showed that it's about a 95% chance that you're going to be hyperinsulinemic. If you're on the other way, if you're low carbing or keto and have been for at least a few weeks, again, no point in doing it. We know there's a very good chance you're going to be Kraft pattern 5, but the body will not handle that shock load of glucose. The next round of research that we're wanting to do at AUT is to start working through with how do we test people to see when we've recommended that they go low carb to help manage their metabolic disease. How do we then assess that later on? And that's, I'm hoping to get some funding later on this year to start doing that testing process. But my hunch is, this is speculation, have a normal meal, then rock up for your insulin test 2 hours later. Let's see what your 2-hour postprandial insulin test is doing. If it's low, under 30 microunits per mil, you're probably doing okay.
Thank you.
This question is for Dave, and Ivor can chime in if he wants to as well. But for those of us that are clinicians and have learned so much about lipidology from both of you, it's definitely changed the way I think about lipids and changed my practice. And I think that when we confine ourselves in this bubble, we think everybody thinks this way. But those of us who, and because it makes so much sense, and those of us who also practice in conventional medicine and conventional practices, find that for the majority of the time, most people have no clue about this research. And I think it's so important, and is there efforts or something we can do to help get your research out so that it's more mainstream? And I know that's very far off, but is there anything we're doing, any efforts we can make, any way we can get your research funded?
Well, actually, yeah. I spoke in my talk, of course, about remnant cholesterol. We have a tool up on the website that's actually a calculator, and you can just feed your 4 numbers into it. And what's been kind of serendipitous is a lot of people have gotten that, copy-pasted the numbers, and brought it to their doctor. And I've extended this challenge to extend to the doctors by proxy and say, look, if you can provide me any study that shows that remnant cholesterol isn't a better association for all-cause mortality than LDL, please bring it to my attention. I'd be very interested. And that's a genuine request. And I think that, one thing that I really want to emphasize, I know this is really hard, particularly for a lot of people on low carb, is I do encourage people to work with their doctors. I believe that most doctors mean right by their patients and really do attempt to do as much as they can to help out others. But the catch is you may still have doctors that absolutely are very adherent to what they've grown up with and what they know, which all of us did up to this point. And cholesterol is kind of special in particular because a lot of us didn't have a lot of problems taking on a lot of saturated fat when our weight was going down, because that was a metric we could all count on no matter what our friends were saying. But cholesterol going up is like the ultimate boogeyman. A lot of people feel a lot of fear towards heart disease, and that's understandable. And unfortunately, it's strange, but a lot of the studies, even the guidelines changing to where they dropped off LDL cholesterol, still hasn't been picked up by most of the GPs that I've talked to up to this point. So unfortunately, I feel you've got to just be a more educated patient. Take a lot of the research that we're helping bring forward and bring that to your doctor, and be open-minded with them. And if they're not open-minded with you back, find another doctor.
Yeah, I might. Oh yeah, I'll just add one thing to that, Nicole. So I'll quote the articulate Dr. Joseph Crofts in our interview at 94 years of age. And he said, Ivor, you have found, as have I, that trying to convince doctors per se of this will be a long, arduous and unsatisfying battle. However, if we could awaken the people, whoopee, there you go. And I think all of this, while it's small at the moment, maybe 1-2% of people in the world are cognizant of what we're talking about. If we can get 6, 7, 8% of medical professionals through this work who are cognizant and aware, there'll be a tipping point when we get up towards 10%. And I just think that's the only strategy. Official channels.
Because let me chime in. The data so far is on our side. If the data's on our side, to quote John Adams, facts are stubborn things. As long as you're armed with good data, it's really hard to fight.
After that, you just need a supportive community and a growing community, and crucially, start converting medical professionals.
Just while we're on that, can I get an idea of how many doctors we have in the room? So, yeah, we've got a great collection. Yeah, it's fantastic, and we're moving in a good direction. Where are we? Yes, please.
My name's Christina Jarre. I'm a second-year internal medicine resident. My question's for Dave. Talking about increase in remnant cholesterol, for me begs the question, what's the underlying mechanism of that? And have you engaged in any discussions postulating that? For instance, what comes into my head is glycosylation of receptors preventing proper trafficking. And I have a second question. You might have gone over this in your presentation, but have you found or noted any cutoff point to stratify high risk versus low risk?
Well, so I'll try to take that in a row. The first one is, and this was kind of the main driving point of why I was trying to get that abstraction across to everybody, is if you start looking at it in terms of energy delivery, specifically direct fatty acid delivery to your tissues, then it should all start to fall into place given the data that I already have on the site for how much you have these remaining LDL particles seemingly as a reflection of what's going on in your body with energy transport. Because as I'm eating lots of fat, my LDL cholesterol goes down unintuitively to most people, because you would think it would go higher when I eat tons and tons of fat. But it suggests that there's a homeostatic model in which it's moving up and down. Now, here's the catch. The catch is, as long as those fatty acids are succeeding in that first job, that they do in fact deliver the triglycerides to the tissues, then it goes to the support second job. And when we see the problems is not when we see a lot of the support second job LDL particles, it's when we see a lot of VLDLs and we see a lot of triglycerides, right? So from a systemic standpoint, I believe the breakdown in the system is what's being indicated by the fact that they are failing to drop off those triglycerides. And that can be a lot of things, but of course correlates with high insulin resistance. You actually have a metabolic breakdown, you've lost your flexibility, and now you see a lot of energy backing up into the bloodstream, not just in triglycerides, but also in glucose, right? And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
If you found any cutoff point for the remnant cholesterol.
Yes, so here's the thing. I'm still relatively new into remnant cholesterol. The very first thing I did is I was scouring everything I could to try to battle back my hypothesis. I mean, truly, I wanted to see if I could find, I'm sure there would be studies that would come up that would say, hey, no, here's where LDL is, in fact, a better risk marker. I have yet to find a single one. Actually, it's surprising how. There's one thing that just frustrates me as an engineer, and I'm sure Ivor can appreciate this. Usually when we find a better measurement than the one that's getting used predominantly, we go, let's go ahead and use that measurement. Like, it's just pretty straightforward. So
you would think.
I feel that way about remnant cholesterol. I feel that way about calcium score. Like, of course, you're actually observing the disease directly. Like, that's obviously a good measurement. We should use that measurement a lot. And so, to some degree, it gets a bit frustrating because I have to comb through a lot of this research, but I also have to be mindful of where the source of the funding is and what it is that they're trying to show with the data that they have. And Ivor could speak to a lot of that himself. He puts up with a lot more of it than I do. I usually get like 5 lines in, and once it doesn't meet the criteria that I'm looking for with like drug and gene studies, I just pass and I move on to the next one. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Veronica, and I'm an engineer from Boulder, and I have a question. I'm a pre-diabetic, and so from what I've listened to today, I want to know what to measure. I could quote my fasting insulin and my HOMO-IR, but should I get a fasting insulin test 2 hours after a meal, 5 minutes apart, 3 times? Is that the takeaway? I'm just looking for the data. Cut to the chase. Thank you.
If you're already low carb, then I would say, yeah, it's not a fasting insulin 2 hours after your meal. That becomes a postprandial insulin. But yes, I'd be getting an insulin level 2 hours after your meal to see, are you actually sufficiently low carb? Do your cholesterol testings, get a ferritin test done. Look at how your liver enzymes are doing, and just look at the rest of how the way the body is working. There's not one test that's going to indicate metabolic health. It's a collection of everything that's going to add up to say how well things are going. Does that help?
Okay. All good. Thank you.
I have 2 questions. One for Dr. Crofts. See, I lead a busy practice in internal medicine, an HMO practice at that. I test fasting insulin levels and fasting glucose, and I do the HOMA-IR as a substitute for doing the glucose tolerance test and insulin tolerance test. So what do you think that HOMA-IR is a good substitute to at least screen these folks for insulin resistance? I've seen a lot of people first visit, obese, no diabetes, normal hemoglobin A1C, perfect lipid panels, HOMA-IR high off the roof. The second question is for everyone. Since I am in an HMO practice, we see a lot of Medicare folks. Medicare pays us by performance. And they are pushing it down our throat to carpet bomb everyone with statins. They make us use the ASCVD risk calculator, and they mentioned that if it is 7.5% and above, 10-year CVD risk, start them on a statin. Also, if you're diabetic, no matter what your numbers are, put them on statins. What do you guys think of those?
So could we take the first question on
I'll take the first question with respect to fasting insulin and HOMA-IR. As you can see from my presentation, I'm not a big fan of it because we don't know enough about the variability. We don't know if somebody's going to have a fasting insulin today of 12, next week 16, the week after that 22, or down to 8. The variation, we don't know enough about that. I've got some literature though I can share with you later. If though the insulin level is over 30 milliunits per mil, microunits per mil, then the person has high insulin. Once it starts coming under that, it's very hard to track the HOMA, whether you're using B, S, or IR. I think HOMA is great for large-scale epidemiological studies, but I haven't seen enough of within practice work to say whether it's going to be a good thing to use for practice. Theoretically, it's not good enough, in my opinion.
Any other comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, HOMA is exactly as you say, Catherine. The only thing is, you know, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good or okay. Dr. Ted Naiman is very well versed in Crofts' work and knows the problems with HOMA. Equally, he uses it a lot because he's mainly striating between people who are down at a level of 1, and in triangulating with their other metrics, he knows they're pretty cool. Not perfect. And then people who are very high, and he knows, especially with looking at other metrics, these guys have a problem. So it's a blunt tool, and it's not a perfect tool, but I just, to say forget HOMA, the reality of doing postprandial insulins as well in America seems to be very challenging. Is it a stopgap measure for, you know, just as a guideline?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you here, Ivor. If you're taking HOMA in combination with a lot of the other metrics, yes, it may be useful.
Correct, because I am going to have problems with insurances and patient compliance with waiting 3-4 hours in the lab for a fast postprandial test.
I think, yeah, and coming from the engineering world as well, we're, if nothing else, very pragmatic, and I'm just very cognizant of the problems in America, and that's why HOMA mixed with a few liver enzymes and the ratios from the lipid panel, you know, and the atherogenic index, and or certainly looking at remnants. You triangulate and put those all together, you're not going to drop too many fish out of the net. You know, you're going to do pretty well, and within the system, until we reach the perfection where America's all doing the best dynamic tests. And the dynamic tests, by the way, they're a no-brainer to an engineer. Imagine they had aircraft engines testing them, and they ran them at idle. And they said, yeah, there's no overheating, this is good. Right? You must have the system dynamically running at operating conditions to get the information, and hence that's why the postprandial is crucial, to get real information. But anyway, it applies in engineering, not in medicine.
And it may be that what will come out is that maybe fasting insulins, because we're running the engine at idle, is not the important one. So maybe we just get the patients to rock up to whatever your equivalent of lab tests is 2 hours after they've consumed something at home. So they're not hanging around waiting. So do we actually need the fasting level? Will a postprandial give us more information? So, you know, we're only just starting to scratch the surface of what's needed. There is so much work that's needed to be done here with robust science to try and triangulate what are going to be the measures. And I think it's going to be a multi-measure thing. Quite excited to hear about remnant cholesterol this morning.
Okay.
What about the carpet bombing of the statins?
Look, I think we should leave that till we've got more clinicians on the panel and the problems of healthcare generally. So, but thank you. But on another session, that would be good to bring up. We're going to run short of time, but we'll see if we can get a couple more questions in.
I'm Jim Small. I'm a pathologist who just recently turned into a full-time teaching professor for first and second year medical students. So I'm having to think completely differently now than I have over the past 30 years. I have a salt question, actually. I noticed that you did sodium and potassium. Did you find any interesting interactions between sodium and potassium? Like, for example, if people were on very low sodium, were there potassium issues?
Yeah, really great question. So first of all, we did the main effect of potassium. We found it was protective, which I didn't show today in the interest of time. But for the interaction, that is something that we haven't looked at yet, but that is something that we're planning to do in a future paper. And it's a very important point because the literature is full of both observational studies and trials showing that potassium mitigates or offsets the effect of sodium. So that would be a very important paper to do. So I agree.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim O'Brien. I'm a psychiatrist in Southern California. I wasn't sure if in this conference we were going to talk about micronutrients and sprouts, how it would come up and why it would come up, but I'm glad it did. And I'm wondering, and I've been kind of obsessing lately on YouTube University about broccoli sprouts, and particularly sulforaphanes and a lot of the work of John Hopkins and Rhonda Patrick's videos on the subject, and I wonder what you thought of that.
I don't know that I have extensive knowledge on broccoli sprouts. I mean, there is quite a bit of antioxidant activity there. There's a high level of superoxide dismutase, which can be beneficial to help with sulfation in the body, and this can be beneficial with methylation issues as well. And that's kind of about the extent that I know about broccoli sprouts specifically, but very healthy food that can be beneficial for these metabolic pathways.
Yeah, there seems to be an explosion in research in that area over the last year. There's 150 studies that have been published specifically on broccoli sprouts and NRF2 pathways and things like that. It's kind of an interesting developing area. So thanks for your input and thanks for bringing it up.
Better make this the last one, but I hope the others will get your questions down and we'll reconsider on other occasions.
Thank you. This is just maybe an extension of a previous question. If someone is under a very tight budget, let's think low-income population, how this person should allocate the budget to follow a low-carb diet? Where should be the focus first?
Erynn.
Yeah, I'm in Ireland, obviously. Ironically, in Ireland, it's around $10 per kilo for the lean mince, the low-fat mince. It's a premium product, but we can buy the high-fat, non-premium mince, the better stuff, for $4. Also, the organ meats were mentioned many, many times. You can make delicious dishes, and they cost nothing in Ireland. I'm not sure about America. They're basically for nothing. And also eggs, as it happens, because of the absurd fear of cholesterol, which has been debunked, eggs are actually not so expensive now, considering the enormous nutrient density that's within them. Now, obviously, you want to get the pastured eggs, but I think even the farmed ones are a lot better than most carby foods, right? They're just some thoughts.
Just one more thing to add. We in my household, we have a cow share, and the price per pound of our grass-fed cow is about the same as grain-fed in the grocery stores. And so if you buy bulk and have a nice freezer to store it in, that helps. I know that's not available to everybody. So that's a thought too. And then I know a lot of people here, I talked to some last night, that have neighbors that have chickens, and they have a deal worked out where they're getting these nice pastured eggs. So, look around, look at your resources. You'd be surprised what's in your backyard.
Could I just add one fun thing, which is actually if you can connect with a butcher, even if you don't have a lot of money, you can actually get a lot of the fattiest pieces of meat for really cheap. So that's always a great trick, and it's a great way in which you can find, because of course they aren't as desired as much.
Great. Well, great if we could have a round of applause for our speakers.